Man, my ex thought she could totally screw me over, and she did. But you know what? Karma's a bitch, and now it's payback time. I ran into her at my new job, and all that anger came flooding back. I wanted to get back at her right then and there for all the crap she put me through. 7 years wasn't enough time for me to bounce back from the mess she made. I lost everything because of her and had to start over from scratch. Everyone started hating on me, so I moved to a different state to get away from her. But guess what? She ended up working at the same company where I was a big shot executive. My history with Charlene was a rollercoaster, and I was hoping to never see her again after our divorce. I met Charlene when I was a young entrepreneur with a booming business. We got hitched just a year after meeting because she got pregnant. Things got rocky after our daughter was born. Even though the baby was still young, Charlene was always at her parents' place. Despite me trying to get her parents involved and complaining countless times, they took her side and said I was putting too much pressure on her because of her depression. Our communication got worse over time, and we only talked about our kid. When our daughter was a few months old, I found out she wasn't mine and Charlene had been cheating with a coworker for a while. That same night, I kicked her out of the house. So I started the divorce process a few days later. During that time, I was the only one bringing in the dough cause she didn't want to go back to work after popping out a kid. Even though she wasn't working, I still didn't stop her from getting money cause I knew it wasn't the kid's fault. Legally, I didn't have to give her any cash in the divorce. I had proof that she was lying to me for years, but she tried to flip it on me by saying I was emotionally abusive and controlling. Her folks straight up lied in court, saying she came to their place with bruises that she totally made up. And her friends backed her up with some fake stories. I had to give up half of my business and our house in the divorce because of the pressure society puts on guys. My once successful business took a hit because of the false accusations. Even my own family took her side, fooled by her acting skills, leaving me with no support and struggling. I had to fork out a ton of cash as part of a settlement in my hometown, which made me pretty much blacklisted from doing any business or finding a job there. So, I had to move elsewhere with a huge debt from trying to save my business. Meanwhile, she kept the house and all the money. I worked at a good-paying job for a year, but most of my money went towards paying off my debts. I didn't bother asking about her life and just concentrated on getting back on my feet. Why I know, my plan totally worked out because 7 years after we split up, I had climbed the ladder to become a big-shot executive at a super successful company. We had just bought out another company and my job was to basically boss around the CEO of the new company and make sure they fit in with our brand. On my first day back at work, guess who I ran into? Yep, my ex. She looked older, but still the same old person. I was so mad that I actually thought about asking my company to fire her. Over the years, I drifted apart from most of my family because they thought I was a violent guy, even though I never laid a finger on her. She tricked me into marrying her after our first meeting. She showed up at my office acting all nice and offering to show me around, pretending to be a friend. I knew she was aware of her tricky situation and thought being nice to me might benefit her. I told her I had already seen everything and asked her to leave me be, but I was still mad about it. Throughout the day, I was thinking about firing her, but even though I had the power to do so, I couldn't just let her go without a good reason. From then on, my main goal at work was to make her life difficult. After looking at her file, I found out that she had been working there for 2 years and was actually good at her job. It seemed like the money she had taken from me had finally run out. I did everything I could to make her work life miserable. At first, I gave her a written warning for being late. So, my employee's boss told me to just give her a talking to for slacking off because her daughter was sick. I didn't really care though. When she messed up a report I asked for, I made her do it all over again, knowing damn well the printer was acting up. She had to work in a dusty, hot room for way longer than necessary. And just when everyone was ready to head home, I made her stay late in the extra office to do more work. That was so stupid, just to waste her time. A few days later, my assistant from the other company joined our team, but there weren't enough officers. I made sure that Lynn gave up her office and moved to a tiny, stuffy room with no proper ventilation that nobody else wanted. I knew it was the middle of summer and the heat was unbearable. When she had to pack her stuff, she looked super pissed off and I thought she might actually try to fight me. I heard her complaining about me to some of her friends. Man, my coworker was always busting her butt trying to handle all the extra tasks I kept throwing at her. She never even took proper lunch breaks because I was always asking for more. And get this, she was up for a promotion that everyone wanted. She totally deserved it too, with how well she was doing and even getting praised by our boss. But when it came time to pick who to promote, I suggested giving it to someone who had been at the company longer instead of her. Tough break. She came barging into my office, swearing she was gonna make me pay for what I did. A few days later, everyone in the office knew about my personal history thanks to an anonymous email that got sent out to everyone. My bosses already knew about my divorce and clean record, so they just told me to take a few days off. I got a tech whiz to track down the email, and no surprise, it was her. I reported her for spreading lies about me, which got her in big trouble at work. Man, there was this rule at work that said we couldn't talk smack or spread rumors about our coworkers' personal stuff. I really wanted to push for her to get fired, but I had to step back from the situation because I was too involved. She had to take a few days off because of this email she sent. I almost got fired too because of all this drama. I decided to give her some space while I figured out how to get her to leave the company and stop bothering me. I couldn't stand seeing her face every morning, it made me sick. Making my pain worse, she ended up leaving the company on her own, which actually saved me from having to deal with it directly. Here's what happened. Towards the end of the year, our company had a fundraiser just before closing out the fiscal year. I had nothing to do with planning it, my job was just to oversee things. Because the company was announcing a name change, we had a strict no alcohol or drugs policy, especially when clients were around. But as the event went on, so I was in the middle of things when I had to deal with a bunch of problems, most of which were coming from her department in charge of the meeting presentation. Some interns started acting weird, looking like they were drunk. One of them even passed out at a table meant for an important investor. It was clear that something was off, so I told my assistant to quietly take the intern away from everyone else. I could smell alcohol on some of the interns, and the CEO seemed to be aware of it too. Feeling worried, I went up to Charlene and asked her to help out with the tasks the interns were supposed to do during the event. She flat out refused, saying she wasn't just some intern like I thought. I tried to get her to come with me to my office because she was causing a scene, but she got more and more angry and kept saying I wasn't her boss. Her speech was a bit slurred and her eyes looked glassy, which was unusual for her. I quickly told the CEO about the situation. I saw some of the staff either high or drunk at the event. I left him in charge of running the event and talking to the guests while I dealt with the situation. We quickly gave breathalyzer tests to the interns who had denied drinking, but they all failed. I asked where they got the alcohol from, saying I just wanted to know to help them out, but they wouldn't spill. I decided that unless they spill the beans, they are in trouble. Once they started spilling the beans, it was clear that we were gonna have to cut ties with them. Turns out, one of them owned up to swiping some wine from my office. I was livid and ready to fire them on the spot. But then they dropped a bombshell. Turns out my ex-wife put them up to it, asking them to snag the wine for a little pre-event party. I couldn't wrap my head around why she'd take such a risk, especially knowing how strict we are about alcohol with our staff. I couldn't even have a drink myself. Okay, so basically we have this rule now that you can't be drinking on the job because some people were driving to work events and could get in trouble if they got caught. I called her into my office and told her to own up to drinking on the job because there were people who saw her. She admitted she messed up, but said she was only drinking because she found out her boyfriend was cheating on her. I wasn't stupid though, I could tell she was trying to manipulate me with her sob story. I thought she was lying when she said she probably wanted the interns to mess up the event after getting drunk. And guess who would get in trouble for it? Me. I told her she was screwed and I was gonna make it hard for her to keep her job. She already got 2 warnings and one more screw-up would get her fired. I laid out all the embarrassment she'd go through in front of everyone. I caught her trying to mess up the event she worked so hard on. Seeing her panic and make up excuses made me feel good. I told her to go home for the rest of the day and said we'd talk about it tomorrow. She started crying in my office, begging for her job and saying sorry for taking the client's wine from use. She said she didn't know about the interns drinking too much and promised to pay back the money if I let her off the hook. I figured out how much she owed. Once I told her off and she was shocked, she started begging me to drop the issue. She admitted that my tough attitude was because of our rocky past and said she wanted to fix our relationship. I brought up how her false accusations in the past had pushed me away, leading to her getting my house, taking away my daughter, and getting full custody with her dad. Now she doesn't even have the house anymore, so she had to move to another city. Back in the day, I might have felt bad for her, but not anymore. She was thinking about how messed up her life had gotten, but I stopped caring. She left for home and I continued running our fundraiser. By the end of the day, I had informed her bosses about her screw-ups and they were pissed, talking about firing her right away. But I wanted to put her through a long and embarrassing disciplinary process. I enjoyed having the power to decide what would happen to her in the company, just like she did to me years ago. The next morning, an email of resignation showed up. So, she wanted to quit right away, but I had other plans. Everyone knew about her screw-ups and she had to deal with it. I made her stick around for a 2-week notice before leaving. And then the company made her pay for the booze she stole from the intern. I even thought about pressing charges if she didn't cough up the cash during her notice period. I made sure she had a tough time. I actually did her a favor by giving her work to do. I gave her a ton of work so she wouldn't have to deal with her annoyed co-workers who worked hard to plan the event. She was really miserable during her last 2 weeks at the office. On her last day, as she was packing up, she paid me for the wine she owed me. She said she hoped I was happy now that she was out of a job. I told her that quitting was her choice and at least this way she could keep some of her dignity, which would have been lost if I fired her. Man, when she finally quit that job, I was so relieved. It was like I wanted to throw a big party to celebrate. I was happy knowing she was going through the same kind of struggle I went through before. Maybe she could start fresh at a new company, but she couldn't use us as a reference. Months later, I had totally forgotten about her until I saw her on the street while I was on my way to a work meeting. Group of unemployed and homeless people looking for work or help. I almost didn't recognize her, to be honest. She looked completely disheveled and her appearance was a complete change from her usual self. I wondered how she had fallen so low when she used to have so much. Even when I lost everything, I didn't end up destitute on the streets. This situation seemed to be a result of her own choices, as life seemed to be punishing her for the lies she had spread. So I basically lost everything because of this whole karma thing coming back around. I want to know what y'all think. Did I go too hard on my ex-wife or did she deserve it all? Anyway, that was a wild story. Now on to the next one. Stay tuned and let's get into it. Just know, I ain't here for judgment. I know I messed up and I've been dealing with the aftermath ever since. Just looking for a place to vent and talk about my life. I'm Isabella, 28 years old, married to my husband Owen, who's 29, for about 4 years now. We were together for 2 years before that. Owen and I actually met by accident at a cute bookstore in the city. I was reading a poetry book called Lost in the Words and Owen was into a classic novel. He bumped into me and we laughed about it, and that's how our story started. We were just chatting about books at first, but then things got real when Owen, with his friendly vibe and love for my poetry, made the bookstore feel like home. We ended up hitting up cafes, checking out art shows, and taking leisurely walks through the park together. Every step felt like a new adventure, getting to know not just the city but each other's worlds. It was awesome hanging out with Owen. It was more than just a relationship, it felt like finding a partner who really got me. That cute little bookstore became our spot where our love story started, showing us that deep connections can happen in unexpected places. Our first date was the start of something special. We kept it simple, going to a cozy Italian restaurant on a quiet street. I was nervous, but Owen was already there, greeting me with a smile. His choice of an Italian eatery showed he was really paying attention to our talks about food. Once we got comfy in a cozy corner, the vibe was just right with soft lighting, the buzz of other conversations, and the delicious smell of Italian herbs in the air. We chatted easily, moving from small talk to deeper stuff. Owen told funny stories from his childhood, and I found myself sharing my hopes and dreams. He had a way of making me laugh without even trying. Everything just felt chill and easy when our food came. We both pitched in to figure out what to order, taking bites of each other's dishes and teasing each other about our weird food preferences. It was clear we were totally on the same page as the night went on. Then, Owen reached over and our hands touched in the middle of the table. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. Without saying a word, we both knew this wasn't just any old date, it was the start of something special. After we finished eating, we headed out on our next adventure. Me and my boo decided to take a spontaneous walk around the city last night. The air was cool and the city lights set the scene for our little adventure. We were strolling hand in hand, chatting and giving each other those meaningful looks that spoke volumes without saying a word. Our first date ended with a sweet hug and plans for more hangouts. Fast forward a few years and our relationship is still going strong. We make sure to have weekly dates and genuinely enjoy each other's company. Ever since we started hanging out in high school, Owen has been my ride or die. Friendship is a bond that has stayed strong up to now. Even though I have a girlfriend who I see as my closest pal, especially outside of my marriage, nothing beats the friendship I have with my husband. We've faced some tough times over the years, but nothing too serious. There are areas where we both need to improve, but these are just things we need to work on to be better people and better partners. We both know that perfection is not a realistic expectation. Right now, we don't have kids, but we are thinking about trying soon. We both have jobs, and even though I make a decent amount, Owen actually brings in more. He's also the one who owns our house. There have been times when one of us was out of work, but we always supported each other financially. We've been through tough times like depression, alcoholism, and some health issues, but our marriage has stayed strong through it all. We've got each other's backs, we make a solid team. Our sex life is always on fire, but a dry spell for us just means going a week without getting it on because we are too tired from work. It doesn't happen often though. We get along great with each other's families, and my family loves my husband like he's one of their own. He's an amazing husband, totally surpasses all my expectations. I truly love him. We've both been attracted to other people before, but we've never really talked about it. Me and this guy at work, we both know that catching feelings is no big deal and it's never been too serious for me before. But this time, man, it was different. I was really feeling this coworker of mine, he's hot as hell and super nice to boot. We started working here around the same time, about 8 months ago, and went through training together. I just couldn't shake off those feelings this time. So, working with him was tough. I started catching feelings for him real quick, and I know I definitely blushed a few times when he flashed that charming smile. It would have been embarrassing if I was single, but the fact that we are co-workers and I'm married just makes it even worse. Even though we don't work directly together anymore, our departments are next to each other, and he would sometimes come by my area. He would casually put his hand on my shoulder and give it a friendly pat. Every time he walked by, he would give me a little squeeze and that smile of his. When we bumped into each other or went to work events together, I would chat with him. I pretty much kept the same level of interaction with all my coworkers. We are not friends on social media, don't have each other's numbers, and don't hang out outside of work. He's invited me to grab drinks at a nearby bar with some other guys a few times, but I said no. Being in a male-dominated field, it just didn't feel right to be the only woman at the bar. Whenever I'm hanging out with a bunch of guys, especially when I have a crush on one of them, I make sure to steer clear of his workplace floor as much as possible. If we end up on lunch break at the same time, I'll say hi as I walk by, but then I grab my stuff and eat outside or on a different floor. I've been trying to push down my feelings for him or tell myself that it's silly, but I just can't shake this crush. I'm worried that I might do something stupid and let my feelings take over. I know people make excuses for messing up once in a while, but I'm trying to stay in control and not hurt my husband. I'm struggling with these feelings and I haven't felt this way since I first met my husband. We were friends for a while and fooled around before getting serious. We were young when we started dating. Previous relationships were never that deep, why I know. I never felt such a strong pull towards someone like this before. I never thought it was even possible with anyone else. I'm not trying to compare my husband to my coworker or anything like that. My intention here is just to explain how I've always been able to push away any feelings for someone else in the past, but with this guy, it's different. No matter what I do, I can't seem to get him out of my head. It's like he's always on my mind, no matter where I am. It's been weeks since I've seen him and honestly, I don't even think about him most of the time. But then there are moments when I see him while I'm heading into work, and suddenly my heart starts pounding. I can't help but want to be close to him, and I wish these feelings would just go away. It's like I'm back in high school again, except now instead of daydreaming in class, I'm trying to keep this guy out of my head and focus on my job. I know Reddit likes full disclosure, but this wasn't that. I was able to talk to my husband about something that was bothering me. These feelings weren't because of any problems in our relationship. I didn't feel like I was missing anything by being with him. There was nothing he could do to make me feel better about it. If he had feelings for someone else, I definitely wouldn't want to know about it. But if he felt like I was neglecting him and it was making him look for affection elsewhere, that would be a different story. I understood the situation. I didn't want to upset him, especially since I have to see this guy for 40 to 50 hours every week at work. My husband can't do anything to change how I feel, and I'm not going to do anything inappropriate. There's no reason to cause problems in my marriage when there's no real issue. Our workplace is mostly guys, with only about 25% to 30% women. We all joke around and have a good time, it's no big deal. Just us guys here showing some love to the ladies. The most physical contact I've had with any of my male colleagues is a pat on the back for a good job, a strong handshake, or a pat on the shoulder to get their attention while walking by to use the copier. On the other hand, I've had female coworkers playfully mess up my hair as they run past, kind of like how I mess around with my sisters. It's not a super formal office, but it's not a total HR disaster either. So, I was really annoyed with my coworker just from making eye contact with him. I felt like I needed to keep my distance from him. But then, when I came back to work after the weekend, I found out that he had asked to transfer to my department and was now on my team. I didn't think it was a big deal, I'm a grown-up and I can handle it. But surprisingly, taking some time away to clear my head and think about where I was putting my energy had a bigger effect than I thought. Things got a bit weird after that. He started bringing me coffee when he got his own, probably because I had a new project and was working longer hours than usual. It was weird though, because he didn't do this for anyone else with more work. Our lunch breaks started coinciding more often, and he even sent me friend requests on social media, which I quickly rejected. Plus, he always seemed to stand a little too close for my liking. I couldn't tell if I was overthinking things, but it was definitely confusing and awkward. I didn't even want to like him, but I couldn't help but be drawn to him. I usually park near the smoking area because I smoke and like being close to my car. One night, as I was heading to my car, he stopped me and asked for a cigarette. We ended up chatting for a few minutes and then he brought up something awkward. He admitted that he'd been into me since we first met, and working together had only made it more obvious. He told me he got that I'm married and said he'd respect any limits I set, but then he confessed he's never felt this way about anyone before and couldn't handle not knowing what could happen. Turns out, he went and broke up with his girlfriend to take things up a notch. Now he's crashing at his parents' place for a bit while he sorts out a new spot. He thinks there's something between us and thinks it's mutual. I made it clear that I'm happily taken. So basically, I told him straight up that I'm married and he shouldn't get the wrong idea about me being friendly. I also made it clear that we need to keep things professional and not cross any boundaries as co-workers. I asked for some space and told him we don't need to talk about this unless it's work-related. After our chat, he seemed kind of bummed out and apologized for overstepping. And there I was, caught up in all these mixed feelings for a coworker who seemed like a real character. Okay, so there's this guy from a movie that I was totally drawn to, making me feel all sorts of things. But here's the thing, I'm already married and committed. Dealing with this crush was like walking a tightrope, trying my best not to make any stupid decisions. I knew I couldn't mess up my marriage, even though the attraction was so strong. After thinking about it for a while, I decided to be honest with my coworker. I told him that I had feelings for him, but I couldn't risk my marriage. It was a tough conversation, and I could tell. Our relationship was starting to fade a bit, so I didn't want to completely break his heart. I asked for some time to think things over, and he was cool about it, giving me the space I needed. As I was driving home, my mind was going a mile a minute. I knew I was going to hurt my husband, and that realization was tough to swallow. But deep down, I knew I couldn't let this attraction mess up what I had with him. My husband was out of town for work, so when I got home to an empty house, I was hit with a strange mix of emotions I hadn't felt in a while. So, here's the deal, I started having a tough time sleeping alone, things were getting pretty messy. Then one night, after tossing and turning, I had a lightbulb moment. Instead of sneaking around and breaking promises, what if I could convince my husband to be open to the idea of us seeing other people? We're not exactly adrenaline junkies, but I thought a little push in that direction could spice things up. The plan was simple: talk to my husband about the idea of an open relationship. It seemed like a reasonable proposal to me. I could explore things with my coworker without. I cheated on my husband, so when he got back from his work trip, I thought I'd talk to him about maybe having an open relationship. But I knew I couldn't tell him about my crush on my coworker, because he'd never go for it. So if he asked why I wanted to open things up, I was ready to say I was feeling a bit bored and wanted some excitement. I was feeling adventurous the next day, and my husband texted me that he was back from his business trip. I was at work, so I replied that I would head home right after my shift because I needed to talk about something. Knowing he could overreact sometimes, I made sure to tell him it wasn't anything urgent or bad. He breathed a sigh of relief and replied with an okay. When I finally finished work, I rushed home only to find that my husband had cooked dinner, and it was delicious Italian, my favorite. We sat down and he had really nailed it. So, after we finished grubbing, he was giving me these looks like he was trying to figure out what the heck was going on in my head. I knew it was time to spill the beans about what I was thinking. I made sure to choose my words wisely, trying to be both careful and confident. I started off by telling him how much I love him and how our marriage is super important to me. He was all ears as I went on to say that I've been feeling a bit bored lately and thought maybe a little adventure could spice things up. He looked confused, even though we've talked about this before. We were getting busy in bed, and then he straight up asked me what I was thinking. It was my moment, so I took a deep breath and finally got the nerve to ask, how would you feel about us having an open marriage? My husband just stayed chill and asked me to say it again, even though I could tell he heard me loud and clear. This dude has always been good at keeping a poker face, even back when we were dating. I figured he just wanted me to say it again to make sure he got it, so I gathered my thoughts. I was thinking about it and asked him what he thought about us opening up our marriage. Let me tell you, my husband was beyond shocked. He didn't just get angry, he completely lost it. He jumped up from the couch, questioning my sanity and demanding to know why I even brought it up. His reaction caught me off guard, so I tried to explain that I thought an open marriage could spice things up between us. But he wasn't buying it. He accused me of lying and said I was just making excuses. Trying to explain cheating, my husband went off on me with his sharp words that hurt deeply. He's so good with words that I was in tears within seconds, begging him to stop and swearing that cheating was the last thing on my mind. But he didn't believe me, thinking I was hiding something and making me cry even more. Then he dropped a bombshell, saying this whole thing made him rethink our marriage. That hit me hard. I begged even harder, trying to take back everything and telling him to forget that I even brought it up. But he wouldn't let it go. He thought my idea of an open marriage meant I was thinking about cheating for a while. It hit me hard emotionally. And then he dropped the bomb, he wanted space. I fought it, but he was firm and even threatened to kick me out. I cried even more. He suggested I stay with my sister or parents so he could figure things out. He said he doesn't trust me anymore and has lost faith in our future. Those words hit me hard. I knew from past experience that when he gets like this, there's no reasoning with him. So, I packed my stuff and went to stay with my sister. She was surprised because I had only. I texted her that I was coming to visit soon. Luckily, we are close and she was cool with it. When I got there, I opened up to her about the fight I had with my husband, spilling all the details. She was shocked and started asking me some tough questions. My sister even asked if I was thinking about cheating. I couldn't lie to her, so I admitted that I had a crush on a coworker. She was disappointed and didn't waste any time calling our parents to tell them. They were disappointed too, but my husband's been ghosting me for the past 3 months, disappearing into thin air. He hasn't responded to any of my messages or acknowledged us when we went to his place. It's like he's completely vanished, leaving us with no answers and feeling helpless. I'm getting more and more worried and frustrated, even calling in sick to work because I can't deal with it. Man, I was so pissed off when I got to work and saw my coworker. All my feelings for him just disappeared, and I realized he was the reason for all this drama. Finally, after what felt like forever, my husband spoke up. I was hoping he was calming down and maybe we could work things out, but nope. He sent me a text apologizing for ghosting me, and then he hit me with a bombshell. I wanted a divorce, no talk, no closure, just a blunt announcement. I was crushed, spent the whole day crying, called in sick to work. My sister tried to comfort me, but the pain was too much. How could I go on without the man I loved so much? The future looked grim without my husband. I felt totally lost. After crying for a bit, I had to face the fact that my husband wasn't coming back. I messed up big time, and it was all my fault. He was dodging me like crazy, but he did end up talking to my folks and gave them a long explanation. He made it super clear that trying to make things right was a lost cause. He even said that couples therapy wouldn't fix the mess. Then he texted me, telling me to sign the divorce papers for a quick and cheap breakup. And just like that, he disappeared from my life. No more constant communication, no replies to my messages. It's really hard to come to terms with the fact that this is the end of our relationship. Totally my bad, but I'm back to my regular grind at work even though I'm taking less sick days now. As for that dude at work, yeah, he's still good looking, but now I just can't stand him. He's the one who started this whole mess by coming up to me in the parking lot, and I'll never forgive him for that. Looks like he knows it too, because now he's bending over backwards to make it up to me. But I'm not buying it. Figuring out what to do about this guy at work is tricky because we work in the same department. But I'm making it crystal clear, no acknowledgement, no interaction. I've had enough of his part in this problem. I didn't go to work today, but I did get an email from my coworker. It started with what seemed like a real apology, followed by an invitation to go out for dinner this weekend to make things right. I responded by telling him that his advances have caused problems in my marriage and that I have no interest in getting involved with him. After work, he sent another email saying sorry again and suggesting we go out for dinner as friends to make up for it. I decided not to reply to the second message, and he hasn't contacted me again today. I'm feeling weird about the situation, starting to dislike my coworker more, but still getting those primal feelings. I'm thinking of having a quiet dinner at home and watching Netflix with my sister when she gets back. I also might ask for a transfer to a different department soon. When a chance comes up, I've been checking out job listings, but I really like my job, so I don't think that's the best move.